Hello Penguinauts, I'm the Beardy Penguin and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Fall of Kerbin. The battle for Kerthenia's heart is raging on. Last turn, Tape carried out a counterattack which did succeed in pushing us back out of the first quarter of the city that we captured. However, our forces held strong, although we did lose our beautiful LF7 Anaconda Super Heavy tank. Its loss will be felt throughout the Kruolan army, but we shall not give up, and now we will be renewing our offensive. So we've actually got quite a few tanks this offensive. I'm not relaunching an Anaconda because they're just so expensive, and I think having a lot of smaller tanks at the moment is far more important. And sure enough, heading straight into the sector of the city that got recaptured by Tape, we come under fire from a 75mm anti-tank gun. It does get a few good shots on our Ninja here before we can start getting effective fire downrange towards it. The rate of fire of these anti-tank emplacements is certainly their advantage, but after a few rounds we do manage to take it out. However, our lead Ninja has had its burn together unit destroyed, or should I say its radio operator knocked out. So we're actually having to move it independently of the rest of the column. So now the rest of the column are taking orders from the Adder, and the commander in the Ninja is just commanding his own tank. So we're having to sort of swap between them to try and coordinate their movements as we move into the second quadrant of the city. There we go, just crossed the boundary, and now we are deep within enemy territory, recapturing the territory that was lost, but recapturing territory that we originally captured from Tape. So I don't even, is it recapturing? But if he I don't know, I'm thinking way too much about this. Anyway, being careful as usual, because of course the Kerthenians are dastardly in their hiding of tanks around alleyways and corners. I tend to group my tanks up together, whereas Tape likes to sort of space them out throughout the city to ambush my column one by one and sort of wear me down, whereas I like to have a bit more of a big battle. Whether either tactic's more effective or not, I'm not entirely sure, but that's just the way we seem to do things. When we reach this park here, I think, okay, we're gonna have to go around this corner. But I want to do it all as one go, all in one big column of tanks, because there's undoubtedly going to be some kind of nasty surprise waiting for us. So we send the Ninja right down the road, and then we send the rest of the column across the park, because of course burn together tanks they're not too good at turning corners, so we send them across a open field. And there we go, they're heading across there just fine. There we go, we make sure they're not going to hit any buildings, and then sure enough we encounter a TD2 Cyclops with a monstrous 128mm gun which just clips the turret of our tank, and we're just about to be destroyed when the cavalry arrives. However, we have no time to celebrate because Tape has caught us in a dastardly pincer movement, and there's another 75mm anti-tank gun sitting right behind us, so we send a round straight into it and manage to destroy it. However, that tank destroyer is still firing, so we light it up with two 57mm from our Ninjas and the mighty high velocity 75mm mounted on our Adder. It doesn't really work with guard mode for some reason, so we just send a shot straight through the lower glacis of the tank destroyer's armor, and it is destroyed. It starts rolling towards us though, rather alarmingly. I can't say alarmingly. There we go. I can't speak today, it's been a long day, okay? So while our tanks continue to shoot at the tank destroyer, we just decide to make sure that that little anti-tank gun is indeed destroyed, because the gun itself is still there. I think what we did is manage to take out the command pod, managed to kill the crew of the anti-tank gun, or perhaps they scarpered. Ha! Cowardly Kerthenians. But that tank destroyer is not stopping. No matter how many rounds we put into it, it's still heading straight towards us, and it has heavy frontal armor, so the only thing that can actually get through it is this 75mm. Our 57mm on the Ninjas can only get through its side armor. So we managed to withdraw our tanks a little bit and put a few more rounds into it, and at last, after a final round goes into it, we managed to rip off its left track, and finally it manages to slow to a halt. Pretty damn deadly if it didn't have that monstrous 128mm gun, because of course it's very slow firing. And sure enough, I just moved forward to ensure that that anti-tank emplacement is actually dead, and we encounter another one. For some reason though, it doesn't fire at us. I'm not sure if this is a glitch or something. It aims at us, and I thought that this tank's life was at an end, but for some reason it just doesn't open fire. Maybe there's a pacifist Kerbal operating it. I'm not entirely sure. This must have been a glitch, so Tape can just relaunch it next turn, but I managed to outflank it with ease, get round behind it, and then just fire at the command pod and take it out without taking any damage. Although this Ninja is starting to look very worse for wear. We are going to keep it at the front of the column though, because there's very little point taking light damage on all of our Ninjas. We might as well just keep taking damage on the same Ninja, because this is undoubtedly just going to get ambushed and killed. So that's kind of the nature of these urban battles, you know. Tape has his counterattacks with all his tanks. He ends up in a sort of big confrontation with my tanks. Me, it's just trawling from street to street, getting ambushed and slowly having our tank force worn down by the almost guerrilla warfare-like tactics of Tape's forces. Although I thought we agreed that they were vampires, not gorillas. That's what that term means, right? Yeah, sure. Anyway, once again, we're advancing around the corner, and it looks like there aren't any tanks that way, but our turret begins to turn, and an 88mm shell rips off the rear half of our Ninja. We get the rest of our tanks around the corner, but then another 88 flies into the Ninja, and it is completely destroyed. These 88s are damn deadly. Now those TD2 Cyclopses with their 128mm, those are oversized guns. Those were designed to kill my super heavy tank. So against smaller tanks like this, the rounds either go straight through or they just miss, and then its rate of fire cause it to just be destroyed. These 88mm guns though, that they do not suffer any of those such problems. So its rate of fire is pretty impressive, and its caliber is perfect for just shredding my tank columns. You can see we're trying to advance towards it and just kill it, but it keeps firing. These things can take a hell of a beating, and sure enough, it destroys our adder and our Ninja, and we are left with only one operational tank. We managed to withdraw just outside the yaw range of its gun, and bam, put a few more rounds into it. The gun on our adder is actually still operational, so we just swapped to the adder after we put a few more rounds into it from the Ninja, and then we execute it with the 75mm anti-tank gun at point blank range. There we are. Whew. Now those were losses that we really couldn't afford to take, but thankfully we have some reinforcements. We have another adder and another 2 Ninjas waiting in reserve, so we can actually fully replenish our tank column. But if we take any losses now, we're going to be stuck with those. These are the only tanks we have left for this continued offensive into Kerthenia before we're going to have to dig in the territory we've gained and cease our offensive. And we're up against another TD2 Cyclops and another 3 of those TD3 Sirens. If we take losses like we did in the last one, then this offensive is going to be very, very short-lived. So once again, advancing. This time we don't have the communication trouble between the lead tank and the rest of the tanks, so we can advance them all as one. And sure enough, we encounter another TD2. Kind of same as last turn though, it's facing the complete wrong way. I think Tape expected us to come from a complete different direction, and as such we catch the TD2 Cyclops with its pants down and engage it. This time it's definitely not a glitch because Tape air parked them, so he froze his tanks in place so that they wouldn't swivel, which was the problem we had last turn. And sure enough, it's facing the complete wrong way, and we just pound it with rounds. These things still take quite a lot of fire, and there's actually a very small little margin you've got to hit in the side of its armor, because it's got the track protecting the lower half of it and the massive turret, well not turret, the massive mounting for the gun on top. So there's actually a very thin sort of sliver of armor that we can actually get through with our guns. But sure enough, we advance towards it and we put a few more rounds into it from the 75mm on the adder, and it is vanquished without any trouble. So that's quite reassuring. We've managed to knock out one tank without taking any damage by just managing to outflank it purely by skill and tactics, not at all just completely by chance and Tape placing his tank destroyers badly. So what we're going to do is we're going to advance down here and just see if there are any more tanks hiding in and around that area, because of course Tape tends to put them near each other, and there seems to be a path he's sort of mapped out for us. But along the way we managed to encounter another 75mm anti-tank gun, although this thankfully is the last one. It puts a few rounds into our Ninja and does some superficial damage, so we just decide to charge at it full speed, try and draw its aim away from the other tanks, and sure enough we put a few more rounds into it. We get a few bounces, but finally another round goes into it and the gun is destroyed. So we're going to leave that Ninja up there and just going to clear this area down here because, as I said, Tape does have his tanks near to each other, and I just want to ensure that there isn't anything else hiding down here. And sure enough, it doesn't look like there's anything down here, so we just advance forward and take another look just to be sure, and then our turret starts turning and we encounter another TD3. Thankfully we've encountered it just outside of its yaw range, but since we are just outside, I feel like it's not entirely fair to shoot it from there, so we move in, and within seconds an 88mm shell just obliterates our Ninja. It's just completely gone. These tank destroyers are not messing about, and despite the amount of rounds it's taken, it's still intact, and it manages to immobilize our second and final adder. However, we managed to stop quite close to this wall, so what we do is we use the ridiculous length of the adder's gun barrel to actually maneuver the tank around the wall to line up a shot on the tank destroyer, hit the building with one of our rounds, but then we line up one final shot and we manage to vanquish the tank destroyer. We're not in a great situation now though, because we just lost a Ninja and an adder, and now we don't have the firepower that we did before. We only have two Ninjas, one of which is superficially damaged, against two tank destroyers with 88mm guns. This is not a fair matchup whatsoever, but we're going to keep pushing until we can't push any longer. We cannot afford to be delaying another turn, so we continue our offensive through the streets of Kerthenia's heart, now being very, very cautious with the two precious tanks that we have left. Thankfully, we managed to catch another one of Tape's TD3 Sirens. However, it sees us as well, and it promptly sends around our way just to make sure that we know it's there. So we quickly move out of its line of sight and then prepare to attack it. So there's no way we can really outflank this gun. We're just going to have to charge at it full speed. So what we do is we line up our tanks ready to just charge round the corner. We know where it is. We're just going to run down there and try and get round its flank before it can get too many rounds into us, and that's our only hope of actually beating it. The frontal armour of these tank destroyers is enough to deflect most 57mm rounds that we're going to put into it, so we're just going to need to try and outflank it. Hopefully the fact that we have superior numbers will aid us. So we charge around the corner, but the tank destroyer is ready and just immediately destroys one of our Ninjas. I was kind of freaking out at this point, and I think, okay, move. We have to get this Ninja into the flank of this tank destroyer, otherwise this offensive is over. So we charge down, we take another shot from down a side street, which shows us where the final tank destroyer is, but thankfully we don't take too much damage, and we manage to get around behind the tank destroyer and put some rounds into it and vanquish it. This is the problem with using tank destroyers. Of course, you can mount very powerful guns into a tank for half the cost, but of course not having a turret means you are very vulnerable to flanking tactics. So once you manage to actually get to it at a close range, a tank destroyer is completely doomed. So we did take a shot while we were heading down towards this one, and sure enough the final tank destroyer is down that street. However, we've got a large central park just to the right of us, so what we can do, since we know its location, is advance through that park around behind the tank destroyer and outflank and destroy it, to which it will be completely helpless to. Those Kerthenians probably laughing with delight at the fact that they've only got one puny little cruiser tank cowering in fear behind the corner, steadying their 88mm towards its last known location, not at all considering that we might just drive around through the park and outflank it. Now, I can already see the comments, "Ah, Beardy, that's not fair!" Well, this is the major flaw with using tank destroyers. As I said, you can mount a massively powerful gun for half the cost in a chassis which is one size smaller, because of course if you're using a turret, to mount an 88mm you need a heavy hull, but Tape here, he's using medium hulls. That's the advantage of using a tank destroyer. However, not having a turret is a big disadvantage, and sure enough we manage to circle around, we find the tank destroyer and we catch it with its pants down. We keep catching a lot of Tape's tank destroyers with their pants down. Maybe there's some kind of strange initiation ceremony that the Kerthenian tank crewmen go through. I'm not entirely sure, but sure enough it is doomed. We put a few more rounds into it and the tank promptly explodes. Victory is ours for now. We can't take the entire city in this turn. We don't have enough tanks, and Tape has got even more tanks lying in reserve. So what we are going to do is fortify the territory we have taken. We've taken another 2/4 of the city, and now we can reinforce it with another adder, another 3 of our Ninjas, and 3 75mm anti-tank guns. Although Tape only has a single light tank actually defending the final corner of the city, he will be able to deploy a few more tanks next turn before our final push to eradicate the Kerthenian menace once and for all. We've got them backed into a corner, and there is surely no escape. Thank you for watching, everyone. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode. Next turn should be the finale. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.